Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about the overall economic situation of Pakistan, especially post COVID. Now, there's this report that has been issued by the International Monetary Fund, which has projected Pakistan's GDP growth at 1.5%. Remember, it was negative last year. For the current fiscal year, 2021, as compared to the previous fiscal year. However, the government has envisioned a GDP growth rate target of 2.1% for the current fiscal year 2021. The IMF's World Economic Outlook for 2021 highlights that the global economic output is going to be recorded at around 5.5%. It further adds that the Asian Development Bank approved a new 5-year lending program of 10 billion US dollars aimed at supporting Pakistan's efforts to deal with economic and social challenges thrown up by the pandemic. Says Pakistan has launched construction work on the Turkham to Nowshera portion of the 1.17 US billion dollars Central Asia, South Asia, which is called CASA Regional Trade and Transmission Project, CASA 1000. It further says that when the PTI came into power, it was faced with an economic crisis that was brewing due to the policies of the previous governments. In order to tackle this crisis, we had to seek help from the IMF, was stated by the Minister for Finance, Dr. Abdul Hafiz Sheikh. And regarding the remittances, now this is a very interesting part because we really depend on our foreign remittances, the foreign inflow of dollars. And it says the remittances received by Pakistan from overseas Pakistanis set another record in December 2020 as inflows stood about 2 billion for the 6th consecutive month. So even if it stays around 2 billion a month, you're talking about 24 billion a year. But will this momentum continue? Now that is the real question, because when I've asked this question to the concerned officials of the ministry, they said, well, the government policies are so friendly and people have really opted to go and use the proper official legitimate banking channels instead of hundi and hawala. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But remember, this increase is also seen in other countries as well when you talk about remittances. What about their policies? The point is that a lot of people, especially the Pakistani workers who were working either in Saudi Arabia or in UAE, primarily these are the two countries which really help us in fetching a lot of foreign remittances. But interestingly now, a lot of people are winding up their businesses and they are wrapping up their accounts and they're sending the money to Pakistan. And obviously when you talk about a certain amount, they will use the official channel. So that is primarily the reason. But when you look at the overall economic situation, I mean, you talk about agriculture, you talk about industry or large scale manufacturing for that matter, or you talk about services. This mix is very, very, I would say, interesting in a way that the dependency which used to be on agriculture has slowly gone down, and it's around 20% as far as our GDP is concerned. When you talk about the service sector, that's huge, 2/3. And manufacturing is still somewhat getting better, I would say, post-COVID. Because when you talk about the COVID, I think it has really shrunk the global economy. When we talk about Pakistan, I think as far as the region is concerned, when you compare Pakistan with Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or India for that matter, that is a lot better. But when you look at the global index, a lot of other countries, look at China, they have done brilliantly well. To talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio Sardar Yasir Khan Sahab. He's the president of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much, Sardar Sahab, for your time, sir. And we've been joined by Farhan Bukhari Sahab, senior journalist, senior columnist, is from the Financial Times. Farhan Bhai, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for taking out your time and joining our program, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. And we'll also be joined in by Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri Saab. He's going to join us in a little bit. He's the member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. But let me put the first question to you, Sardar Yasir. I mean, when you look at the report, I mean, it suggests that 1.5% growth is what the IMF is expecting. And then when you look at the projected GDP from the government side, it says it's going to hover around 2.1%. I think that is going to be a great challenge, even getting to 2%. But when you look at the global economy, they say it's going to be 5.5%. When you look at the region, few countries are negative 10 for that matter. When you talk about India, negative 8, negative 6, negative 4, so many countries. Pakistan has been able to recover that from the negative territory into the positive, but still 1.5% is what is projected if everything remains constant. Overall, so first thing, are you overall satisfied with whatever the steps that have been taken by the government in order to improve the overall living standard of the people, especially during this pandemic? Your take.
I think overall there's a lot of improvement. And if we look at the same IMF report, it's interesting to see the correlation. Now, IMF has said that they're anticipating at 1.5%, and Pakistan's government says 2.1%. But you look at the neighboring countries, you look at India, their anticipated growth from the IMF is about 11%. The emerging nations is about 5.5%. The developed nations is about 8%. And you look at China, you're looking at about 67%. You look at Africa, you're looking at about 3.5% for Africa. And then this is just just a tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to come. So it's surprising, considering the scale of Pakistan, considering the potential that Pakistan has, for us to even consider 2.1% is an embarrassment for someone like me to understand. And I cannot comprehend, because I know the level of production that's happening in Pakistan. The basic issue is it's the undocumented economy, which we're not taking into account. If you look at the fact that you document all of that and everybody becomes a taxpayer, everybody becomes a filer, this could definitely go up well over 3.5 to 4% easily. Because IMF in their report, as you can see, is probably saying that in the next 2 years, we should be touching 4%. So if you look at the documented side, it could easily be 67%. So there's that aspect. Now also with regards to the improvement in policy, definitely. You've seen a huge boost in textile. That's primarily because of policy. They've reduced the tariffs, and based on the tariffs in terms of the electricity cost, the gas tariffs.
Yeah, the input cost primarily. Yeah.
It's made us more competitive in the world. And naturally, at a time of COVID-19, when the other economies are shut down, Pakistan hasn't shut down. Thanks to, again, the Prime Minister, because he's taken initiative and said, we cannot let Pakistan close. We cannot survive, because I think COVID-19 for us is not the bigger problem. It's poverty, which is something we're trying to fight. We need to fight that as a bigger disease. So I think the fact that we remained open has been our strategic advantage. That companies have said, why not divert towards Pakistan, which is an economy ready to provide us. So we have done well as far as pharmaceuticals are concerned, as far as surgical equipment is concerned, as far as textiles is concerned, and also in terms of the construction package. I think that's been a game changer for us as well. The fact that last year we were able to do a lot more investment. You've seen a lot more investment coming in with the CDA auction. You're also seeing the same thing this year, because the construction package is being extended, thanks again to the Prime Minister. So there's a lot of conducive policies that are coming into effect, which are adding a lot of value. But then again, there's shortfalls. There's a lot of shortcomings as well. That's again to do with FBR. FBR has recently now come forward and said that we're going to start attaching people's accounts and withdrawing funds directly from an individual's account. Now, I think that's unethical. By all means, if you look at any practice in the world, any fund organization or any government organization which is related to funding, you will never have taxation directly coming to somebody's account and saying, you know what, we need to withdraw this tax based on your earnings or based on the vehicle you're driving, based on the size of the house you're living in. It's speculation. That then has to be, somebody has to be held accountable. The way you do that is you accuse them of something, and then they file an appeal, goes to a tribunal, and based on that you can then make a decision. But in Pakistan, what's happening with FBR is accusing people and then withdrawing the funds from their account. Now that's daylight robbery.
FBR and its problems are huge.
Yes.
And the problem is that, even if you look at the previous head of the FBR, Shabar Zaidi Saab, I mean, I was watching his interview, and he was very honest, and he was very, very straight and candid. And he said that, there are people who are so strong, and these monopolies, they have got such a tremendous control that even if you want, no matter how transparent you are, how honest you are, it is very difficult to survive in that kind of an environment. And that is the most unfortunate part. In fact, that's the culture. Primarily, it's just like, whether it was the egg which came first or the chicken, whether the people should pay and expect for the reward in terms of tax, or you just don't pay because you don't expect anything.
Well, Shabar Zaidi Saab is the one who actually withdrew that policy that you cannot go into an individual's account directly and withdraw funds. And I think that was a professional move. Look, if you're trying to take people into confidence, and if you want more filers in the economy, you cannot threaten them. You cannot draw more fear. Fear is the biggest element which has created this trust deficit in the last 5 years. So moving forward, we need to take people on board as opposed to pushing them away.
All right. Now, we've also been joined in by Dr. Abid Suleri Saab, and I would like to welcome him. And Dr. Saab, thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World, sir. But let me put this question to Farhan Bukhari Saab. Bukhari Saab, economy has been a problem, is still a problem, and I guess it is going to remain a problem. Maybe the issues are not that complex and we have made them complex. Or maybe the issues are so complex that we do not have the vision to sort them out. We do not have the capacity to look after the internal affairs. Now, is it the policy that matters, or is it the government that is unable to implement that policy? Is that the problem? Or primarily you believe this is the general attitude of the problem when it comes to the issues related to FBR? Should we blame the people for not paying their taxes and not becoming filers, or you believe it's the other way around? It's the FBR which should be held accountable for not being able to collect that money which could have been collected and could have been spent, because it's all about the income and the expenditure at the end of the day. Bukhari Saab.
Ji, thank you very much. I think problem is an understatement. Pakistan's economy is in a state of crisis. And I say that because irrespective of whatever accounts you might hear otherwise, improvements under one head or the other, there's an overall crisis which surrounds the mainstream low-income households of Pakistan, and this precedes COVID-19. So we're really not talking about the last year or so. The crisis began before that. And this is a recurring crisis. So ultimately, we have to ask ourselves the question, really, where is it that there are these recurring challenges? I think as far as policies are concerned, historically, Pakistan has successfully put together some of the best minds. Let's not forget, it was the late Dr. Mahbubul Haq and his team who carved up a plan that the South Koreans took to South Korea, enforced in their country, and became a world-class case of how an economy needs to be or should be reformed. So here, the recurring challenge is not really in terms of knowing what needs to be done. The recurring challenge, and this is really the heart of the matter, is to get it done eventually, which is in many ways a political question. We blame the FBR, and sure, there's a lot in FBR that's gone wrong, but ultimately it's the leadership. The leadership, not just under Prime Minister Imran Khan, we've had a series of setbacks on revenue collection year after year under government after government. I think another fundamental flaw is that too often we look at our national economy through the prism of almost a company. And, just like companies come up with a balance sheet, some good things happening, therefore we pick and choose, or our leaders pick and choose, select some areas of progress without necessarily answering the fundamental question whether this is beginning to mark a turnaround for Pakistan's mainstream population. Clearly, that is not even begun in today's Pakistan. This has not happened in the past, and this is really where the challenge lies. So ultimately, it's not just one FBR. It's on the one hand the ability of our political leadership to make things happen, to lead where leadership is required, but on the other hand, it's a series of institutional changes that are necessary. Let's not forget that ultimately to see Pakistan's economy finally begin to grow much more robustly than the numbers we are seeing so far, whether it's 1.5 or 2.2 or 2.5%, we really need to be doing much better than this. The heart of the solution really lies in revamping Pakistan's agriculture, which a succession of governments haven't really touched beyond the tip of the iceberg. So essentially, unless we can go into our villages, into our rural areas, deal with food insecurity, deal with the matter of hunger, and rejuvenate Pakistan's agriculture to the extent that we should be an agro-exporting country, which we haven't done. We have the potential, we have the land, we have the people, We need to make it happen. Unless we do that, I think Pakistan's, for the foreseeable future, Pakistan will go through these recurring crises that will keep on adding to the periodic uncertainty and periodic instability
All
that
right.
we see driven by the economy.
All right. Now, Suleri Saab, couple of questions regarding the remittances, because two basic, areas. One is your export primarily, sir. You have shown some sort of growth in that also, but not very significant that can change the overall course of the economic growth. But having said that, when you talk about the remittances, sir, we have seen a tremendous growth, almost $2 billion every month that's being sent back to Pakistan. Primarily, whenever I've asked this question, the government officials, they believe that the government policies, they are brilliant and people have a lot of trust in them and they're using the legal channels to send their money back. Whereas, when you look at the other regional countries, the flow of remittances has also increased. Their policies, they've been the same, means that primarily a lot of people are losing their jobs abroad. A lot of people are collecting their wealth and they're, whatever they have accumulated there, maybe in the form of a house or something, and they're sending it back now. Is that the reason, sir? Just explain this phenomena, that how come certain policies have really triggered the inflow of the remittances to that level, sir?
Well, thank you, Faisal. First of all, let me give an introductory remark. And introductory remark is that in 2020 and in 2021, especially when it comes to economy, we should not be overjoyed with any good news and we should not get disappointed with any bad news. And the reason is there are a lot of uncertainties which are still unfolding in 2021 too. So which way things they may turn up, one never knows. Now, coming back to your question on remittances, I'm not sure about what is happening in other countries, but in our country there are a couple of factors, and one factor is this restriction on travel. So especially when you look at the previous patterns, those who were going to Saudi Arabia and to Middle East, either on visit visa or on religious visits, they could have brought a lot of foreign exchange back home from their friends and relatives that they could then distribute in their families. So they could have
cash by hand, right?
Yeah, cash by hand. Now, of course, for last almost 1 year, that channel is stopped. Second, I can't tend to agree with your theory, because if it was just the losing of job and increasing flow of remittances, that should have been stopped by now, because now we are in 11th month of this pandemic. So those who were losing their jobs during last 11 months, they should have sent enough liquidity back home, and now it should have start getting dried. So if it is not happening, perhaps due to FATF compliance, due to promotion of formal channels for remittances, the perhaps informal remittances, those are now being channeled through formal remittances. So while the total inflow, it might not have increased a lot, but the channel, it has certainly changed. And informal channels, those are being discouraged, and formal channels, those are being encouraged, and that's why we can see more documentation of remittances.
All right, that's one side. Depending on two major factors, remittances and your export. So let's talk about export. A quick comment on that from you, Suleri Saab, because when you talk about textile, unfortunately, the bigger basket of our export was always depending on the textile, whether you talk about the bed sheets or the garments, or even, I remember, in fact, we were talking about Shabar Zaidi. He is into towel making business as well, and once I was interviewing him way back, almost 18 years ago, Pakistan was able to sell only towels worth $1.1 billion. So the trajectory, I mean, that's very confusing now. So are we getting into product diversification now, or are we still depending on the old school of thought, and whatever we were producing earlier, we still, or have been able to sort of tap new virgin markets abroad, sir? Because that is exactly what the Chinese are doing.
Well, Faisal, there were a couple of theories with the export. In the past, we used to say that we are losing out on our foreign exchange conversion competitiveness. Our rupee was artificially stabilized, so that's why exporters were not able to export. We were also talking of a very high markup rate. Now we know that State Bank has not only reduced the markup but also has given some sort of future forecasting that in the near future that is going to remain in single digit. I think what is happening in case of Pakistan that due to increased consumerism, many of our textile owners, they have lost incentive to export. So if you look at the total manufacturing, export manufacturing, there are certain conservative estimate that about 30 to 40% of them that get consumed in the domestic market. Other guesstimates tell you that it is more than that. So even the export industries which are enjoying the textile exporters which are enjoying all sort of, or which have been and even now which are enjoying all sort of incentives, unless and until those incentives and rebates and subsidies, they are not linked with their export performance. They don't have an incentive to increase their export because Pakistan itself is a quite attractive market for them to market their output and market their products in the domestic market. And that is one of the reasons we neither see export diversification in textile, nor we see any export increase in dollar terms.
All right. Now, so that's a couple of other important points. I remember when the government of Imran Khan Sahab was presenting its first budget about a year and a half ago, Khan Sahab was really emphasizing on one major export side, and that was about the IT. I'm not going to compare the Indians with Pakistanis because India has a huge market. I mean, if you only talk about Bangalore, you exactly know what's going on out there. I mean, a lot of work has been sent from the West over here, whether you talk about making films or you talk about shooting or you talk about, for that matter, you know, making anything that we see visually on the screens. I remember Imran Khan Sahab was saying that we have a lot of potential. Yes, we do have a lot of potential, but I'm not talking about the last budget, I'm talking about the one before that. And he said we'll be able to export around $4 to $5 billion worth of IT, because you don't need to be in any country for that. You can be sitting in Brazil and doing business with Australia, or you can be somewhere in Europe and managing things in South Africa. The point is now, sir, we've hardly been able to cross the figure 1 billion.
Yep.
And the future is all about that, sir. Yes, we do understand what the large-scale manufacturing is, what would be like, what it would be like to, you know, make Mercedes cars and get the value addition done and then, you know, make money out of that. Pakistan can make jets. Pakistan can make its own indigenous planes because we had a focus there.
And tanks.
We have the best missile system, indigenous again. We have been able to do that, you know. You talk about the surface hugging or the terrain. I mean, it's brilliant. One of the best. I mean, you can compare it with it. But when it comes to the very basics, sir, agriculture for that matter, or any other, I mean, we're still stuck in the 18th century, I would say, sir.
Yes, I agree.
So don't you think this, when I say product diversification, I'm not saying that thoroughly change everything and take a U-turn. What I'm saying is gradually move towards the trend and then get your market share out there.
I totally agree with you. Look, with regards to the export, you're absolutely right. We're not even touching 1 billion. We're actually more in the range of $940, $950 million. You're right about our neighbors because they're touching $136 billion. And another neighbor of ours, Bangladesh, is targeting to touch 5 billion this year. That's 21's target of theirs.
And look at their textile export. They've become the number 2 in the world after China.
Yes.
Last year, their exports exceeded $38 billion only in textile.
It's not
with
because
a growth rate of 20%.
It's not because they're cheaper. Pakistan's labor is actually cheaper than theirs. We're by far the cheapest in Asia. The problem is policy, economic policy. We need to look at the sustainable economic development across all sectors. Look, I completely agree with you that product diversification is one of the basic things that's missing out. So we don't have the level of variety. Also, in terms of marketing, we've never been able to promote made in Pakistan. We are in every form talking about brand Pakistan, made in Pakistan. But in true essence, we've not been able to do it because we're selling our products to our neighboring countries. They're relabeling it and reselling it to the rest of the world as their own, but it's our product. And we're very rich when it comes to human resource. We're very rich when it comes to minerals in every way. I mean, in terms of skill, like you rightly said, that we're one of the few countries that has an air force that's making its own aircraft. In terms of an aircraft for the Air Force, the only one. So there's a lot of technology transfer is what's missing, and there's a lot of potential, but for that you need technology. Now, even in terms of furniture, in terms of exports, if you look at Turkey, they exported nearly $2 billion last year. We exported about $50 million. Now, there's no comparison. That's leaps and bounds apart, and the reason that's apart is we have a bigger country, we have more human resource, yet we don't have technology. So transfer of technology will only happen when you reduce duties or completely waive off duties, so existing manufacturers can get new equipment, and also when you have more companies looking to venture out in Pakistan. In terms of IT, look, there's another area where we're lacking in terms of payments. Currently, you only have one major company doing online business, which is Daraz, which is again not entirely Pakistan owned. It's owned by Alibaba. We can have so many more. We still don't have Amazon in Pakistan. We still don't have eBay in Pakistan. And one of the primary reasons is we don't have payment partners in Pakistan. So for people to send and receive funds, you need to have those portals opening in Pakistan. And I can't say why. In the Middle East, through their state bank, these portals are approved. So there's no longer an issue of Sharia law or compliance because they're working in the Middle East. Amazon is now in Dubai, and they've bought out one of the local companies.
What's our problem then?
Our problem is policy. State bank needs to endorse these companies. I'll give you another example in terms of where we're missing out on. When we're looking at financial transactions and you look at derivative trading, DTS, a lot of companies are trading world markets from their own state banks, through their own state banks, because each bank is offering another intermediary platform to do that. Pakistan doesn't have that. In Pakistan, you can only trade local markets, local stocks, but you cannot correlate with any world markets. Who's losing out on that? So let's say a Pakistani has an account overseas, London, whether it's in the UK or anywhere else, or in Dubai. He's not giving that income to Pakistan government. Pakistan government has no control on any form of transaction that's happening overseas. Why is it happening overseas? Why are the IT companies receiving funds in Dubai and Qatar and all the other free zones? Because Pakistan does not have a format or policy in place to endorse them, to support them. And that's a revenue loss for us, for the individual as well as the government. And these are the things. So look, Pakistan has all the potential. When we look at export, Pakistan's not focusing on doing roadshows. So when I connect with all the commercial counselors, when I connect with our commercial counselors overseas or the foreign missions that are in Pakistan, they can see the potential that we have in terms of our mangoes, in terms of our textile, in terms of our rice, in terms of our construction industry, everything, they can see it, but we can't show it to the rest of the world. We need to market ourselves. There's also a disconnect with institutions like BOI Islamabad that don't have a strong liaison with Chamber of Commerce. What we need to understand is Chamber of Commerce is one of the most basic institutes that every single individual should turn to for anything, because we're representing the entire business community.
Correct.
Whether it's Lahore, whether it's Karachi, whether it's Islamabad. We need to be taken on board when it comes to policy formation, whether it's FBR, whether it's BOI, whether it's any other institute, whether it's CDA or KDA. President Islamabad Chamber of Commerce should be a part of FBR board, should be a part of the CDA board, so we can constitute better policies that can then be implemented. Now, with regards to FBR, we're advocating on every single forum that only 7 to 8% people in Pakistan are paying tax. So therefore, the entire burden lies on people like us who are paying tax, and we can't afford that burden because we're the ones
you
who
can
bring.
Squeeze them to a certain limit.
We are being
but
squeezed.
You can't.
But
Exactly.
what we want to do is we want more filers. We're actually planning on doing seminars to educate the basic trader. That's where the volume is, the majority, the masses, and we need to educate them on how this system works. But the problem is this system is too far complicated for even someone like me to comprehend how a WeBox system works. So we've overcomplicated things. We've got 70 different types of taxation which we don't need to have. There's different tiers, different barriers. So why complicate? Why not simplify by taking people like us who can support, endorse, and also carry
that's
forward?
Brilliant. I mean, this is what we always suggest, that before making the budget, these are all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
Make them sit together,
Yes.
make them do a good brainstorming session, and come up with some sort of viable proposals.
I'll give you another good example.
And unfortunately, they listen to you, but they don't do what you want them to do.
Well, they trust us. They don't trust them. That's the difference. See, we're voted and we're elected, right? So people have voted for us. The business community has voted for us and chosen us. They haven't chosen the government.
You think the business community, or these chambers for that matter, they are that influential?
Absolutely.
Or that resourceful that they can actually convince and tell people or the other business community that taxes is what you need to pay. and this is what you will get in return. Obviously, it is going to be a win-win situation for both
I
the
can
parties,
promise
the government
you,
and the individual.
I can
or the
promise
firm.
you, and I'm saying this on national TV, that if you take the Chamber of Commerce across Pakistan on board in terms of economic policy,
A lot
especially
can
with regards to
happen.
FBR, we can easily take this 8% figure all the way to 25, 30%. I can guarantee this, and I'm saying this on national TV. Look, there's another aspect which we're talking about policy. In 2019, we announced an SRO. This is regarding imports. Now, we announced an SRO, which is 237, which stipulates that any import of any consumer good, which is primarily food, chips, and all these things, has to have a halal certification and has to be printed in Urdu. Now, if these markets, these retailers are buying from wholesalers like Asda and Walmart and all these other Sainsbury's and these brands, they're wholesalers. They can't relabel or certify as a halal certification.
This is because this is not their product.
This is not their prerogative. Also, we have to go to the manufacturers. The manufacturers will not supply me 100 chips with a label in Urdu or halal certification. What has that done? Now, through the grey market, products are still coming into Pakistan 3 times the price. So what has that done with inflation? Inflation's gone up, skyrocketing over 12%. Whose loss is that? The government loss, and it's a loss for the consumer as well as the retailer. So we're not looking at conducive policies. We need to have supportive policies in place. Now, I can't see any logic in that. It's not like any consumer.
Somebody was once telling me, honestly speaking, because when you talk about the dog food, for that matter, the 21 inches, 21 kg bag, and interestingly, if you've got more dogs, I mean, you'll be ending up with buying at least 4 bags a month or something, even more. The price tripled during the last 18 months to say 2 years, tripled. And I don't know what sort of a formula was applied on that, because it's not halal, yet it's food. You understand? I mean, and
There's no logic.
there's no logic. I mean, and again, it is considered as a luxury item.
It's erratic and irrational.
I mean, I don't understand that. Let's put it in one. I'm just giving you one example. These are the confusions, which are there and which needs,
And it's not rocket science. It's basic.
Sir, there's
It's
no
basic.
rocket science in anything other than making a rocket. That's the thing. But unfortunately, this is what is happening. Now, Farhan Saab, the global business dynamics, they have changed. Earlier, our friend in our studio is telling us that eBay or Amazon, for that matter, or Alibaba or Daraz and all these online companies, for that matter, their businesses have multiplied many folds, because a lot of people prefer to order online, and this trend is increasing by each and every passing day. For example, you handle your bank accounts in your phone. You can make payments. I mean, this is a new phenomena for majority of the Pakistanis. Maybe a few percent would have been doing it much before that. But sir, the global business dynamics, they have definitely changed. The trends have changed. When we talk about the 5 Ps or the 6 Ps of marketing, I mean the distribution, for that matter, and so many other factors, they have totally transformed. What sort of an effect it is going to have on our economy, sir? And do you believe this trend is going to continue now like that, sir?
Well, the global environment has gone through a very radical change. But whether that will change country like Pakistan, the answer is yes and no. Yes, to some extent, those trends have already penetrated Pakistan. We can be at our home on our iPhones or computers, pay our bills and make transactions and so on. But then there are certain other hard realities which we have to bear in mind, which are very much intrinsic to Pakistan. I must go back to over 30 years when I began writing for the Financial Times out of Pakistan. And I remember going to one of my first few TV discussions. At that time, it was PTV. We were talking about some of the same issues that we are discussing today. Reforming the taxation system. Why is it that people don't pay taxes? How can people be persuaded to pay taxes? And at the end of the day, the conclusion must be that nobody likes paying taxes, whether it's Pakistan or Timbuktu or the United States or Europe or wherever. You have to penalize people, and you have to do it honestly. Let's not forget, Al Capone didn't go to jail on a murder charge, even though there was blood on his hands. He went to jail on a tax evasion charge. In Pakistan, people flout the law openly, they break the law, and yet most of the time, people who are well connected not only get away with breaking the law, but they seem to be very proud of it. They bandy about their violation either on WhatsApp or other kinds of media. This has to change. The Pakistani state finally has to learn that for Pakistan's future prosperity and future stability, you have to start behaving like the state, like a state should behave. If you don't do that, if you remain a very soft state, if you are weak in enforcement of your laws across the board, and especially on something like making people pay their taxes, this is what you're going to get. 8%, or in real terms, less than 2% of the country's population paying their income tax. The tax payment is less than 8% of GDP. By some accounts, it's significantly lower. The only time we reached the magic number of around 12% was in the early 90s, but since then it's been coming downwards. And really, to argue that we are going to somehow or the other publicize the message, market the message, and persuade people to pay their taxes, at least in my experience over the last 30 years, has not worked. I think the time has come for the state of Pakistan to behave like a state should.
I think that's $1 million question. But which state is going to behave like a state, sir? That's the problem. Because whenever there's a government of Pakistan People's Party, we hear great ideas coming in from the politicians, and then you talk about PMLN. Oh my God, this is like a trader-friendly political party, and they will give a lot of incentives. PTI came in, okay, fine, no corruption, nothing. But there are huge challenges. I mean, when you're in the opposition, you always end up criticizing regarding the circular debt. When you're in government, you get to know exactly what the problem is, whether it's related to PIA or it's related to the steel mill or other white elephants which we have. I mean, forget about the break even. We are in losses, and we will remain in losses unless and until we bring in some sort of a change. Now, coming to you, Slary Saab, two major areas. We'll talk about the services sector also. But sir, manufacturing is large scale, whether you talk about, earlier our friend in our studio mentioned that, regarding the surgical goods or regarding the textile items, we have been able to increase our export. But sir, there are tremendous other areas. I'm not saying that you end up setting a $10 billion industry. Look at Sialkot, look at Gujranwala, look at Faisalabad, look at Gujarat for that matter. These are small cities as compared to Karachi or Lahore for that matter. But look at the trade. I mean, Sialkot, they had their own airport. They ended up having their own airline. I mean, people have that kind of money and that kind of potential and will. Because if they are not provided that service from the government or from the state, they end up doing it themselves. I mean, this is unbelievable, but this happens only in Pakistan, I would say, sir. Out of the box solution, sir. Forget about, talking about the same old problems which we had, the issues, and, coming up with certain sort of remedies or solutions for that matter. But at the end of the day, I believe we have to think out of the box. And when it comes to agriculture, look at the kind of wastage regarding a produce. You talk about value addition, doesn't even exist. We end up importing cheese and butter and so much more from abroad. So why can't we produce it here? Look at the kind of production of milk and other dairy products which we have in Pakistan. Why can't we capitalize on our own strengths rather than competing the others who have already mastered the art? Sir.
Of course, one reason is that people, they don't find it very lucrative option to invest in research and development if their traditional products in traditional ways they are getting sold and they are providing them a handsome profit. They don't have an incentive to invest in research and development. And even if they will invest in research and development in a country where you don't have a proper respect of copyright and patents and trademarks, and where controlling piracy becomes tough, no one would be investing in any new research or any new product that would immediately get copied. That is one. The second thing that you rightly mentioned about agriculture and livestock, we are unfortunately not able to be part of any major food value chain, be a regional food value chain or even a bilateral food value chain with China, with any of the Middle Eastern country, or international food value chain. And that perhaps to some extent was due to artificially stabilizing our rupee versus dollar. I won't take name of the brand of the cereal, but 600 gram of that cereal now is being sold in Pakistan for 2,400 rupees per box, just corn cereal or wheat cereal. And we know that when rupee was under 2 rupees per dollar, it was being sold at 500 to 550 rupees per box. Now, if you don't leave a cushion, a profit cushion for your local industry to compete and to add value with these type of policies, the local industry, they won't be investing in R&D. So now, after this depreciation of rupee, the flip side is that many of the things they are getting expensive, like your petroleum products or your edible oil. But the positive side is that on the luxury import items, now the Pakistani manufacturers, they are able to compete. So now if you go to any supermarket, you will find the cereals which are being produced in Pakistan, a huge number of those. Previously, there was only one particular company that was preparing cereals, and it was not able to compete with all the multinational brands because those are being sold much cheaper in Pakistan. So I think it's a structural issue, it's a policy issue, and it is an issue where we have to think out of the box solutions of it. Now, when you talk of manufacturing, one of the issue that the manufacturers of Sialkot they are facing right now is a new certification and new standards for which they don't have a lab in Pakistan. So the PEP manufacturers and the surgical item manufacturers in Sialkot, they were telling me that they have to send their samples to China, and they have to send their samples to European countries to get the certification. Similarly, the electrical manufacturers, the fan manufacturers, they have to send their sample to China in order to export it to Saudi Arabia. So if you don't have any international accredited labs in Pakistan, if you don't have those testing labs and the standard providing facilities, then of course your manufacturing base, it is not going to expand. And if it is not going to expand, of course, we as a nation are a loser. So all of us, not only the government, but also the private sector and academia and research organizations, we have to play our role towards, I would say, a mid-course correction. We bypassed manufacturing from an agro-based economy, we directly landed into being a service-based economy. And now is, I think, the time whereby we can take a pause and we can perhaps try to handhold manufacturing and make it on the, bring it on the mainstream.
All right, Sari Saab, thank you so much for your input, sir. And Farhan Saab, was a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much for your participation. Wish we had more time, but unfortunately, I'm totally running out of time now. And thank you so much, Sardar Saab, for your presence as well. And that's all we have for this Saab. I'll see you, inshallah, on Monday. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Have a great weekend. Khuda Hafiz.